At a fancy dinner for her 25th birthday, Estella's parents dropped a bombshell that destroyed her world in seconds. What they told her next was so cruel that it turned a celebration into a nightmare. The evening that shattered my entire existence began like any other ordinary birthday dinner. My name is Estella, and I had just turned 25 years old. The fact that my parents insisted on taking me to an upscale restaurant downtown should have been my first clue that something was different. Birthdays in our household were never really a big deal while I was growing up. They were quiet, almost forgettable events. Maybe there would be a simple cake, a quick mumbled happy birthday, and then everyone would simply go back to their own routines. But this time felt different. They had reserved a table at a fancy restaurant where candlelight flickered across polished wooden tables, soft jazz music floated through the air, and the rich smell of grilled steak and butter filled every corner of the room. I walked into that restaurant feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time around my parents: hope. I actually thought that maybe, just maybe, they had finally decided to treat me like an adult. Perhaps they wanted to acknowledge that I had grown up and built a decent life for myself with a steady job and my own apartment. My mom greeted the hostess with a bright smile that seemed slightly forced around the edges. My dad kept glancing around the restaurant almost nervously, like he was waiting for something important to happen. At first, I genuinely believed they might be planning a surprise party for me. I thought maybe some of my friends would walk through the door any minute, or perhaps they had some exciting news about their own lives that they wanted to share. What I didn't realize was that the announcement they had planned was actually about me, and it would destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. We sat down at our table, ordered our meals, and made casual small talk while the waiter brought our drinks. Looking back now, I can see how strangely calm my parents acted that night. They seemed almost rehearsed, like actors delivering lines they had practiced many times before. My dad kept adjusting his napkin nervously while my mom slowly sipped her wine, watching me closely like a scientist studying a specimen for an experiment. When the waiter finally brought out a small dessert with a single candle flickering on top, a few nearby tables noticed and clapped politely as I leaned forward to blow out the flame. For one brief, beautiful moment, I actually felt genuinely happy. Turning 25 felt like the beginning of an exciting new chapter in my story. I had built a stable career, I had my own space, and I had real plans for my future. I honestly believe this dinner was simply my parents finally acknowledging that their daughter had become a successful adult. But then the candle smoke faded into the air, and the silence that settled over our table became deeply uncomfortable. My dad folded his hands together on the tablecloth and leaned forward slightly, using the exact same posture he always adopted when delivering serious news to the family. Then he cleared his throat and spoke words that instantly destroyed the entire evening. He looked directly into my eyes and said, "On my 20th birthday, my own parents took me to dinner, but only to tell me that I was adopted." For a split second, I actually thought he was making some kind of strange joke. I even let out a nervous little laugh, waiting for him or my mom to join in and laugh along with me. But neither of them made a sound. Their faces remained completely serious, almost cold, like they were discussing something as ordinary as the weather forecast. My smile slowly faded from my face as the reality of the situation began to sink into my brain. My heart started pounding violently inside my chest. "Wait, what did you just say?" I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. My mom leaned back comfortably in her chair and let out a short laugh, but there was absolutely nothing warm or kind about it. The sound was amused, almost mocking, like she found the entire situation entertaining. She tilted her head to one side and then spoke the words that cut deeper into my soul than anything else that entire terrible night. "We only kept you for the tax benefits," she said casually, as if she was talking about returning an item to a store. "Now you're 25. You're useless to us." The restaurant around me suddenly turned ice cold. All the sounds that had filled the room just moments before faded away into a dull, meaningless background noise. I sat there staring at her, my brain struggling desperately to understand how any human being could say something so cruel so casually to their own child. For 25 complete years, I had honestly believed that these two people sitting across from me were my real parents. The people who raised me from a baby. The people who were supposed to love me and care about me no matter what. And now, in less than 60 seconds, my entire childhood had been reduced to nothing more than a financial transaction, a tax write-off that had finally reached its expiration date. My dad nodded his head slowly, as if he was confirming a successful business deal that had gone exactly according to plan. Then he added calmly, his voice flat and emotionless, "We've already filed the paperwork to legally disown you." Those terrible words hung in the air between us like a final verdict being read in a courtroom. There was no appeal. There was no mercy. There was only the cold, hard truth of what I had always suspected deep down but never wanted to fully acknowledge. My mind started racing desperately through memories from my childhood, searching for clues I had missed. The distant birthdays with no real celebration. The cold, quick hugs that never felt warm or loving. The way my achievements at school and work were always met with complete indifference instead of the pride and joy that other kids seemed to receive from their parents. For so many years, I had told myself that I was just being too sensitive, that I was imagining the distance between us. But sitting there at that restaurant table, staring at the two strangers who had raised me, everything suddenly made terrible, perfect sense. For just a moment, I felt tears trying to push their way out of my eyes. But instead of crying, something strange and unexpected happened deep inside my chest. The initial shock slowly began to fade away, and in its place, a quiet, powerful calm started growing. Because the truth was, this conversation wasn't actually as shocking to me as they clearly believed it would be. Several months earlier, I had secretly started questioning certain parts of my past. Small details about my birth records never quite matched the stories my parents had told me over the years. That innocent curiosity had turned into serious research. I spent late nights studying documents online, made phone calls to hospitals asking questions, and eventually ordered a DNA test that changed absolutely everything I thought I knew about myself and where I came from. So instead of arguing with them or begging them to take back their cruel words, I calmly folded my hands together on the table and looked directly at both of them. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just spoke quietly and said, "Funny you should bring that up right now, because I actually found my real biological family. And they're sitting in this very restaurant at this exact moment." For the very first time that entire night, both of their faces went completely pale with shock. The instant those words left my mouth, the entire atmosphere at our table changed dramatically. Just seconds earlier, my adoptive parents had been sitting there looking relaxed and almost amused, like they had already finished their business with me and were ready to leave and get on with their evening. But now, both of them froze completely still. My dad's hand stopped halfway to reaching for his glass, and my mom blinked her eyes rapidly, like she hadn't quite heard me correctly. The silence that stretched between us suddenly felt even heavier and more suffocating than anything they had said to me before. My mom recovered her composure first. She leaned back in her chair and forced out a small, dismissive laugh. "Estella," she said slowly, swirling the wine around in her glass with practiced elegance. "You really shouldn't make up ridiculous stories like that. It's quite embarrassing for everyone involved." My dad nodded his head in agreement, trying to look calm and in control. "We've already told you the truth tonight," he added firmly. "There's really no need for all these dramatics." I watched their faces very carefully, studying every tiny expression that crossed their features. For 25 long years, I had tried so hard to understand these two people, hoping desperately to see even the smallest sign that they actually loved me. But now, sitting across from them in that moment, I saw something else entirely written across their faces: confidence. They genuinely believed they were still completely in control of the situation. They thought I was simply bluffing to protect my pride after the brutal rejection they had just delivered. But they were absolutely wrong. I leaned slightly forward across the table and deliberately glanced toward the restaurant entrance. "I'm not bluffing," I said calmly, my voice steady and sure. My mom rolled her eyes dramatically. "Estella, please stop this nonsense right now." Before she could even finish her sentence, the restaurant door swung open. A small group of people walked inside together. I had been watching the time all evening long, waiting patiently for exactly this precise moment to arrive. The hostess greeted them warmly and then pointed directly toward our table. Without even thinking about it, my parents both turned their heads to follow her gesture. At first, their expressions showed nothing but confusion. But as the group of strangers slowly walked closer to where we were sitting, that confusion began transforming rapidly into something else entirely. The woman leading the group had deep, beautiful auburn hair, the exact same shade and texture as my own. Her striking green eyes looked almost perfectly identical to the ones I saw staring back at me from the mirror every single morning of my life. Standing just behind her was a tall man with calm, kind eyes and sharp cheekbones that looked almost exactly like my own facial structure. And walking beside them was a young man, probably close to my own age, who looked so similar to me that any stranger on the street would immediately guess we were related. The woman stopped just a few steps away from our table. Tears had already started filling her eyes as she looked directly at me. "Estella," she asked softly, her voice trembling with emotion. I slowly stood up from my chair. For one long, suspended moment, the rest of the restaurant completely disappeared around us. The jazz music faded away. The conversations at nearby tables became silent. The clinking of glasses and silverware vanished into nothing. All I could see were the three beautiful people standing right there in front of me, the family I had spent my entire life not knowing I was missing. I nodded slowly, a small smile finally touching my lips. "Hi," I whispered back. The woman covered her mouth with both hands as tears rolled freely down her cheeks. The man standing behind her gently placed a supportive hand on her shoulder, though his own eyes looked extremely emotional too. Behind me, the silence coming from my adoptive parents had become absolutely unbearable, heavy with shock and disbelief. I turned back around to face them one last time. My mom's confident, mocking smile had completely vanished from her face. My dad sat staring at the strangers with a tight, uncomfortable expression. "What exactly is this?" he demanded, his voice sharp and defensive. "The truth," I answered calmly, feeling stronger than I had ever felt in my entire life. The auburn-haired woman stepped forward closer to our table. "We've been searching everywhere for our daughter for 25 long years," she said softly, her voice thick with tears. "There was a hospital paperwork mistake right after she was born. A mix-up separated us from our baby girl. We only recently found old records that finally helped us track her down." My adoptive parents sat there at the table completely speechless, their mouths slightly open. Just minutes earlier, they had been acting like they held all the power in this situation. Now that control had completely disappeared, and they had no idea what to do or say. I picked up my purse from the table and looked directly at them one final time. "You said you only kept me for the tax benefits," I said calmly, my voice steady and sure. "Well, congratulations. Your investment period is officially over now." They said absolutely nothing in response. For the very first time in my entire life, these two people who had raised me had no words left to say. No cruel remarks. No cold dismissals. Just empty, stunned silence. I turned away from them forever and faced the family I had finally, after 25 years, been able to find. My biological mother stepped forward immediately and wrapped me in the tightest, warmest hug I had ever received in my life. Unlike the cold, quick embraces I remembered from my childhood, this one felt genuinely warm and real and loving. My biological father smiled gently at me with tears in his eyes. "We reserved a table across the room," he said softly. "We were really hoping you would come and join us over there." I glanced back one single time at the table where my entire old life had just ended forever, then I turned and walked together with my real family toward a brand new beginning. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more amazing true stories every week. Thank you for watching.